Well, welcome. I'm so glad you've chosen to join us here today, and I will make sure to make it worth your while. Today's going to be a really interesting conversation. I'm so looking forward to talking to Mr. Don Eggspuehler, and we're going to be talking about negotiating with honor and the power of a promise. So, welcome, Don. It is so great to have you here.
Hi, thanks for being on the program, Cindy.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you here. And for those of you who may not know him, Don's a Marine Corps veteran and he author of Letters to Mom and other books. But Letters to Mom most recently, and it's a powerful collection of letters that were written to his mother during his time in service from 63 to 69 to 72. And what began as a promise to write home regularly to ease his mom's fears became something of an emotional lifeline and also ended up being a historical document and an unexpected path to healing. And that story really caught my attention, and it's told with humor and vulnerability and raw honesty, all of which are such important tenets of the art of feminine negotiation. And Don shares the realities of military life from boot camp to bombing runs over North Vietnam and the emotional terrain of PTSD and survivor's guilt as well. And I think his story reminds us that even in war, the deepest negotiations are personal, the ones that we hold with ourselves and with those that we love. And I think that's often forgotten. So, in this conversation today, we're going to explore the extraordinary power of keeping promises, the therapeutic gift of writing, and how Don's journey sheds light on emotional resilience and the art of connection. So Don, let's start with the promise. You made a vow to your mom before heading off to Vietnam, and can you take us back to that moment and what compelled you to turn that promise into a series of these heartfelt letters?
Oh, I'm happy to. And it was the Vietnam War had been going on for like about almost 10 years. When I was in high school and college, we were always worried about the draft.
Yeah.
And my college graduation day, I got my draft notice. And my mom was there for the ceremony. And she looked right at me and she said, "Okay, you better promise that you'll write regularly and send me lots of pictures."
Yeah.
Because she was really worried about
Of
me having to go to Vietnam like everybody else. Luckily, I'd already gotten my pilot's license when I was in college. And with a college degree, I thought, well, maybe I can get into a flight program. And I did with the Marine Corps. And I started writing her letters from the day I entered boot camp all through flight school. And ultimately, when I went overseas, I was with a great squadron in Nam Phong, Thailand, when we flew missions into North Vietnam at night. And we supported ground troops during the day. After I got back from Vietnam, I was really kind of bitter because I didn't like how things
Yeah.
had ended.
Yeah.
And so I didn't talk to my friends or family really about Vietnam at all. I just kind of bottled it up inside.
Yeah.
About 6 years later, I was up visiting my mom in Iowa because she had cancer at the time. And I
So,
said, "Mom, did you save any of those old letters?" And she says, "Oh, yeah, I saved them all. And they're
oh,
in a
of course.
box." "Oh, yeah." And she said, I'm going to read them again someday. And I said, "No, you're not, Mom." They're they're all handwritten and all different sizes of paper and kind
Yeah.
of hard to read. But I said, I'd love to take them back home and reread them myself.
Yeah.
And when I did, I really got some closure
Yeah.
about my own feelings about
Yeah.
the war.
Yeah.
So I thought the best thing I could do was take the best moments out of each letter and type them up
Yeah.
and give it to her as a Christmas present, as
Oh,
a
that's
book.
beautiful.
And I did, and it was one of the best gifts I ever gave her.
Yeah, I
She
bet.
just loved it.
I bet.
Now that the pressure was off, now that I was
Yeah.
back and
Safe.
married, had a couple of little girls at the time. So that's really how it all started. And
Yeah.
I would have never remembered a tenth of the stuff that
Yeah.
happened without getting to see the actual letters again and documenting it.
Yeah.
She died the next year from cancer, so I got the book
Sorry.
back and it sat in my closet for over 45 years.
Oh my gosh.
I, yeah, and I got it out one day and I said, this might be helpful to
Yeah.
Vietnam vets that are
Yeah.
struggling with PTSD
Yeah.
or Afghanistan vets or
Hmm.
even people who've never been in the military.
Yeah.
So I decided to publish it, and I really had a good reaction from
Yeah.
people that have read the stories
Yeah.
because they are authentic.
Oh,
to
and no
Jim and
wonder. I mean, it's like the most beautiful form of journaling in some ways, right? I mean, it's a gift to you. It's a gift to other. I would hope my boys would do that, but sadly, Don, I know they wouldn't. I could barely get them to call when they were away at university. So I think the chances of getting a daily letter were pretty slim. But now your letters are filled with, humor and grit and fear and tenderness. So how did the letter writing become a tool, or did it become a tool for emotional survival for you during your time away?
Well, it really did. Back then, one of the most important things that could happen to you is to get a letter while you're in the
Yeah.
service. It just means the world to you to
Yeah.
have that contact. So I kept up my side of the bargain too, and I sent letters. Really, there was not a whole lot extra to do except
Yeah.
write letters back then,
Yeah.
especially when we were overseas because we couldn't call on the telephone
Yeah.
anymore. And it's kind of a lost art these
Yeah.
days of
Sadly.
everybody's busy typing texts and emails. But you're absolutely right. It did document it, just like I was journaling.
Yeah.
And I tried to keep it funny, keep it light, because she was really worried
Yeah.
about me having to go into combat, which I eventually did.
Yeah.
And I think I had the survivor's guilt because our squadron lost 7 guys. They were shot down
Wow.
and they didn't come back.
Yeah.
And I had survivor's guilt for
Of course.
years about that.
Yeah.
But again, I went through some counseling, which helped a lot.
Yeah.
And I think rereading the letters and all the processes that you go through helped me to deal with it.
Yeah. And I
And
want to say you're right about it being a lost art. And for our listeners out there, just on a side note here, write a letter to someone today. When you finish listening to this podcast, think of somebody and you're like, I don't know about you, John. I still get excited when I get regular mail and it's not a bill and it's not, No, in the world
really,
of negotiation, we talk a lot about presence and purpose, or we should be more. I think that traditionally they didn't talk about that, but I certainly do. And I wonder what role did purpose play for you during your service and how did that purpose shift over time?
oh, that's a good question. I felt I had an obligation to do my job as best as I could. And I did enjoy the flying, I got to admit. But it was something our country was involved in. I was in the military,
Yeah.
and you don't question what
Yeah.
they tell you to do.
Yeah.
Those are orders.
Yeah.
I think on the officer side, I was lucky because after a few weeks of real harassment at boot camp, they started trying to get us to be leaders and solve problems, and and because these guys were going to be leading troops in
Yeah.
combat,
Yeah.
most of them. And then again, once we got into flight school, that was just plain fun, and it was something I'd already been through, so I really kind of had a leg up on some of the guys.
Yeah.
I think the purpose there was just to try and leave with an honorable peace.
Yeah.
And we were all frustrated because it was always a defensive
Yeah.
battle that we were
Yeah.
playing.
Yeah. I've heard.
Until the very last year when I was over there, we were bombing Hanoi at night and day and night with B-52 bombers and everything else. And they finally said, okay, we give up,
Yeah. No.
and came to the Paris peace talks. And one of our guys came back actually as a POW,
Yeah.
out in
Wow.
Kroboth. So
Yeah.
that was very heartwarming to finally see the POWs get released. But I think everybody still had a pretty bitter taste in their mouth
Well, and the
how we
trauma.
handled that.
I mean, the trauma, Don, I imagine. And I think many of your letters describe, traumatic or deeply stressful experiences. Yet you'd mentioned before they're laced with wit, which was kind of beautiful a way to receive it. And do you think was humor for you a conscious coping mechanism or just a way to process the chaos? How do you think that came about?
Oh, sure. And again, behind the scenes, there was a lot of humor going on,
Yeah.
especially when we were in combat, because we were stationed in the jungle of Thailand, and we were living in tents with no running water, no electricity. It was a brand new Marine Corps base. It was actually an old Air Force runway that had been put there 5 years before
Yeah.
and been abandoned. So we were out in the jungle, had to have mosquito nets over our
I bet.
cots, and it
Yeah.
was hot. It was really hot and humid. But once you're in that situation with a bunch of other guys, a lot of funny things happen
I
behind
bet.
the scenes. That's what I was trying to get across to my mom
Yeah.
and to my whole family.
Yeah.
That, again, in the worst of times, you can find a laugh here
Yeah.
and there.
Yeah. That's
So
good advice for all of
that
us.
was helpful.
And today, not
Yeah,
to get into politics, but I think the world is so polarized today, and we're seeing more of that, and certainly in United States. And humor is a beautiful way to try and deflect some of that tension and allow us to connect again as humans, right? And in our lives, personally, professionally, when you're in negotiations, whether with loved ones, with friends, as we're navigating these difficult political times, being able to use humor is great. And I think I want to go back. You had started to talk about survival's guilt, and I kind of went off on you there, but you've been very open about how it impacted you after the war. So, did revisiting your letters help you sort of renegotiate your internal dialogue about survivor's guilt at all, Don?
no question about it, because it did. It brought me closure. I laughed at the letters, and I really had a great time going back through them myself.
Yeah,
But I knew what kind of an impact this could have on my mom and other people that had lived through that time. And that
yeah,
was my purpose, is to share it with them as much as I could.
yeah. And now you talk about the invisible wound of PTSD, which I love how you phrase that because I think it's very true. People don't see it on the outside and maybe don't understand it. And sometimes people themselves don't even recognize it. So, and first, thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing your story about that because I think we don't talk enough about mental health issues. And until we start doing it openly and vulnerably the way you have, I think things are not going to change. But I was wondering, did the write, and we touched on a bit, but did the writing and then later the publishing of your letters help contribute to your healing for those invisible wounds?
Oh, I'm sure they did,
Yeah,
but quite honestly, I went to some counseling, and the guy I went to had already counseled just literally hundreds
I
or
bet.
thousands of Vietnam veterans.
Yeah,
So he really understood PTSD
yeah,
and got me to just unload all of my feelings and let it out. And I felt comfortable with him
yeah,
to tell him all this. Once that had been released,
yeah,
I felt a real relief, actually, and it changed my perspective. So I would really recommend anybody struggling with
yeah,
PTSD, especially,
yeah,
go to some counseling, and even a grief recovery group or something like that is helpful, because these are people that have been through grief as well. And in
yeah,
my case, it was, it was an invisible wound because I came back, without a scratch.
yeah,
But I didn't have, the nightmares are real,
yes,
and not getting sleep and
yeah,
depression, just kind of spiraling. That brought me right back out of it.
yeah.
And I
Well, it's
realized that was one of the lucky,
yes. And
yeah,
such great advice for everybody. Like, and whether it's PTSD or other, we're very conditioned to hold it in. You got a stiff upper lip, and that's what it means to be a man in particular, I think, much more certainly for men. And in fact, the opposite is true. It's when you're able to let it out, when you're able to actually access your feelings and, get that emotional intelligence to be able to deal with it and know when we need help and or to be able to talk about it. I think it's beautiful. And speaking of that sort of stiff upper lip, that masculine, I think the military in particular is often seen as the sort of epitome, if you will, of that masculine culture, that discipline, toughness, and stoicism. But your letters are filled with empathy and, connection and vulnerability. So, how did writing to your mom allow you to tap into those feminine strengths? I call them feminine, and I always put it in quotation marks. So I should be doing air quotation marks here as we talk about it, because there's no such thing as masculine or feminine. We all have masculine, feminine energy. So, did writing the letters allow you, do you think, to tap into those strengths? And if so, did that help you
sure.
survive is the wrong word,
Um,
but deal with it?
but something that's interesting that's happened in the last several years is a lot more women have become pilots in the Air
Yes,
Force and
that's true.
and everywhere else. And they're just as good as the guys ever were.
Of
They
course.
really
Yeah.
are very talented and can keep their cool when things start going crazy in the cockpit.
Yeah.
So I'm really impressed with how the military has kind of opened that up and other officer programs for women, because they wanted to serve their country just as much as the men
Yeah.
and weren't allowed to for the longest time.
Yeah. Which is
So
crazy. Yeah.
I think that they really have a good understanding of empathy,
Yeah. Yeah.
women pilots,
And
because
so did you. Where do you think yours came from, if you don't mind me asking?
I think really telling stories in the first place was something my grandfather passed on to me.
Nice.
I grew up in a small little town in Iowa, about 5,000 people, and he was retired already, a retired banker. So he would just come over and sip on a lemonade and tell me stories about when he was a boy.
Yeah.
And really inspired me. I just was inquisitive and kept asking questions.
Yeah.
And he had all the time in the world to answer those questions.
Yeah.
So I've written a couple of books that were about my growing up, and
Yeah.
I called them life lessons learned in grade school,
Yeah. I love that.
kindergarten, third grade, and fourth grade through sixth grade. And I've got two more coming that'll be junior high and high school
Yeah.
back in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
I think being in the service really did help me to really kind of see what was important,
Yeah.
first of all, to me.
Yeah.
Then keep the promises that I made to my mom
Yeah.
that I would write.
Yeah.
So, and after a while, after you get used to it, it really is much more natural
Yes.
than some people have such a hard time putting their thoughts down on paper.
Yeah.
And then for me, it's kind of easy
Yeah.
because it just kind of flows. And then I can, edit and
Yeah.
take out things that shouldn't be in. But
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've
again,
all got lots of
I,
that.
yeah, I left the letters pretty much authentic, just the way they were.
Yeah.
And that's what I was looking for, was that
Beautiful.
authenticity.
Well, and it's lovely that you had the example from your grandfather. And I think sadly, again, like letter writing, it's a bit of a dying art. We don't have that oral tradition the way that we used to, I think. And for our listeners, I really encourage you with your kids, with your grandkids, rekindle that the joy and the gift, I guess is a better word, of storytelling, because I think it empowers us and it empowers those that we tell the stories to. And it gives them permission to open up, to start being more aware of the story of their life. And then we can take more control over our life and be a bit more intentional about how we show up. And you had talked about losing friends there, and I think from boot camp to bombing runs, from the absurdity of skydiving accidents to the heartbreak of friends lost. Your book, it struck me. I see everything through the lens of negotiation, right? Like we negotiate with ourselves, we negotiate with our kids, and it read like a negotiation with mortality, our own and others. And I was wondering, was there a particular moment or moments that were hardest for you to revisit in the pages when you were going back over it?
Well, those were by far the hardest part because you get so close with these guys, especially when you're in a combat situation.
Yeah.
And it's a camaraderie that's hard to even explain, much closer than even a fraternity in college.
Yeah.
And when you're there, and again, there wasn't much to do because we're living in tents. So we'd play poker or
Yeah.
drink beer in the evenings because there's no TV, there's no
Yeah.
electricity.
Yes.
And yeah, you get so close to these guys. They really are your brothers.
Yeah.
And when you lose one or two, or, we lost seven just
Yeah.
in our
That's
squadron.
crazy.
This was common for almost anybody in the military that was in Vietnam. At least we weren't on the ground watching it happen.
Yeah.
I kind of knew that if we ever got hit with a SAM missile or anti-aircraft, that airplane was full of gasoline and
Yeah.
it would have probably been just a white flash and we
Yeah.
never know what hit us.
Yeah.
I worried more about getting hit in the wing and having to eject and
Yeah.
come down in the jungle in North Vietnam.
Yeah.
That was a nightmare that I had for
Terrifying.
years.
Of course. Yeah.
Again, when you lose those guys, that's something that never quite heals.
Of
And
course.
it doesn't, and their families are always affected. For
Yeah.
some of them are just now being found, some of their remains 50, 60 years later.
Wow. I didn't know that.
So, you know,
Yeah.
it ripples across a whole families and a whole generation in this case,
Yeah.
because nobody wanted to keep fighting in that
Yes.
war
Yes.
after we'd been there for so long.
Yeah.
And Afghanistan,
Yeah.
you'd
Yeah.
think we'd learn a lesson
We did.
after.
Well, and that's what I love that your series are called, and for our listeners, like go check them out, Life Lessons, because my God, do we need them? Because exactly what you said, Don. We don't learn our lessons, and now we're at risk of destroying some of our history. So we're really not going to be able to learn the lessons for those future generations. So now you had mentioned about the counseling, because I was going to ask you, like for our listeners who maybe have a loved one in the military or maybe dealing with PTSD themselves, I was going to ask what wisdom you would offer about navigating those emotional negotiations. So getting some counseling and talking about it was one. Would you have any other advice for our listeners who are maybe dealing with that?
Well, yes, when I was really kind of facing depression, full on depression, this counselor told me, do something every day that you really enjoy.
Hmm.
Okay. Find something that just gives you pleasure and do that on a regular basis. And for me, that was writing. So I started journaling and writing, and that's where a lot of the other books came from.
Yeah.
But it can be almost anything. It can be a round of golf, or it can
Yeah.
be playing tennis, just something that kind of gets you out and about and with other people,
Yeah.
and something that you love.
Yeah.
And that was helpful. And I think, again, just being aware of your own feelings and your own reaction and learning how to process it. And
Yes.
this guy was really helpful to help me do that,
Yeah.
and told me lots of other stories of other Vietnam vets. And their PTSD was much worse than what I had, because they had actually seen stuff happen right in front of them
Yeah.
to their buddies.
Yeah.
And
I can
that's,
imagine.
again, really hard to get out of to unsee in your brain
Yeah.
after you've been through it,
Yeah.
especially when you're sleeping, when you're in bed
Mm.
at night
Yeah, I bet.
and going through those nightmares
Your
and the
defenses
sweats.
are down and the memories come back, and that ties back to, I think we were talking about that purpose earlier as well. So I think that's great advice for our listeners. I mean, that, get counseling, be vulnerable and talk, find an outlet like writing, and also rediscover your passion, right? Something that you're feel very passionately about, some purpose. It doesn't have to be a world-changing purpose, but something that fills you up. I think so often we get stuck in that the to-do mentality of life, that we don't make the time for what should be the priorities in our life, those things that matter to us. Now, and I want to go back to that idea about that leadership. And you'd said, more women are coming in now, and certainly brought a different level, I think, of empathy to the table. Because leadership in the Marines historically was often taught through that command and tact control kind of tactics. But I think many of the most effective leaders use collaboration and connection. So did you ever witness or practice what, I call them so-called feminine traits in leadership while in service? And what do you think about that? What would you say?
Oh, sure. And especially our new skipper, when we had a change of command just before we went into combat. And he was another Ohio State grad, which really helped in my case. And his name is James Brown. And what a great leader this guy was. He passed a few years ago, but he was a genuine one of the guys. He really was. But he had the rank, and he was the commanding officer, and we called him Skipper. And he'd go on combat missions just like all of us. And he wouldn't give himself anything that we couldn't have access to, and made it possible for us to do a lot of things in the jungle that you normally wouldn't think about. Just
Yeah.
setting up a movie for the guys, for the enlisted guys at night.
Yeah.
And it was the old style movies on film,
Yeah.
but we put some white boards up on the mess hall and put a projector out there, and they sat on the gravel and
Yeah.
watched movies at
Yeah.
night. And something just like that. And I also was in the special services for my day job when I wasn't flying missions.
Yeah.
So we got to bring in USO groups, rock bands, and
Yeah.
even got Bob Hope on his very last Vietnam tour, came to Nam Phuong, to
Wow.
our base,
Yeah.
with his wife, Dolores, and Red Fox,
Yeah.
and Falana, and Miss World. And,
Yeah.
I'm thinking back now to that Christmas when Dolores sang White Christmas.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
I bet.
The
I
whole,
bet.
about 500 Marines crying their eyes out. They were so tough. But
Well,
she came just for that.
and you know what's
So
so
it was really,
beautiful about that is it gave you permission to tap into your vulnerability, right? It was a way to sort of release it. And vulnerability is often seen as a weakness, I think, in our culture generally, and particularly in military culture. But your letters certainly model it as a profound strength. And can you speak to how allowing yourself to be so open actually made you stronger? Or that was my perception. Maybe I'm off base. What do you?
well, once I realized what my behavior was like to my wife and my kids, and even at work, I realized that, I was on the wrong path. I needed to straighten myself out.
Yeah.
And that's where the counseling came in extremely helpful.
Yeah.
And I can focus on the moment, on what the beautiful moments that you have every day with your kids.
Yeah.
And so I learned to just switch off work when I left the office, and I was in computer software
Yeah.
sales for 30 years. And I enjoyed that. And I had to do a lot of traveling. So my wife really took over the reins of getting the kids to school and
Yeah.
getting everything organized on a day-to-day basis
Yeah.
while I could focus on work. But after work, we focused on the family,
Yeah.
and that I got to enjoy my kids, and they all turned out great.
Yeah. Oh,
So
lucky.
I think that
Nice.
what's important in life
Yeah.
is keeping the balance between
Yes.
work and play.
Yeah. And prioritizing it. I think we assume we'll just find, everybody always says, yeah, I got to find time for that, find time for that. And I'm always like, no, you're not going to magically find time. You make the time for the things that are your priority. As you said, you got home from work and that was family time. I love that. Now, I saw that writing home to your mom was almost a daily act of emotional negotiation, if you will, for yourself and to alleviate hers, right? With the deal with the fear, the truth, with hope. What did you learn, if anything, about emotional honesty during those years for yourself?
That's a good question. I think, again, it's all kind of a cumulative effect that after you have dealt with this and you know you're okay, you
Yeah,
got out of the situation, that really you should be really happy about living through it and not feeling guilty.
yeah,
Because really, again, none of us had any control over who was shot down and
yeah,
who wasn't. We just had to try and do our best to avoid any aircraft fire or SAM missiles when they're fired at you.
yeah,
And some guys just weren't lucky.
yeah,
Some guys just flew in at the wrong time at
yeah,
in the middle of the night. So life treats you this way a lot of times, things you can't control,
yeah,
but it's how you react to them. I think that's really important,
yeah,
and how
yeah,
you can personally go through struggles, and we're all going to have them. We're all going to
yeah,
have really bad times that happen to us or our family
yeah,
through this life. But
yeah.
again, some people deal with it fine, and others let it just destroy them, which
Yeah.
is really sad, I think. So,
And you said something really profound there, and it was a game changer for me and it took me a long time to get like you want to, we all try and control our circumstances, right? And when we feel like we're losing control, people react very poorly typically. So I love it, and I want for our listeners to really pay attention to that. We can't control, whether in extreme circumstances like the military or in everyday life, like Don was saying, we can't control the things that happen externally, but we can control how we choose to react. And when you recognize that and own that, that is a game changer for how we show up in life. So you've given such great advice here, Don. Now, if you were mentoring, a young person entering, well, I was going to say entering the service, but frankly, just life, entering, adulthood, what would you encourage as you were talking about those so-called feminine traits? What so-called feminine traits would you encourage them to lean into to become a better leader and human?
wow, well, I have already talked two of my nephews into going in the military because they got out of high school, kind of
Yeah,
didn't have any direction,
yeah,
and I thought needed some discipline in their life.
yeah,
And again, it turned out wonderful for both of them because it paid for their college after they were in, first of
yeah,
all, so they weren't in debt.
yeah,
And secondly, it taught them a lot of leadership traits. And being a veteran really helped them find jobs after they went to college.
yeah.
And one nephew, he was a nuclear engineer for an aircraft carrier. He
Wow,
had very good grades in high school, but he showed a real aptitude for nuclear physics and stuff like that. And
wow.
now he works for a nuclear power plant and makes a great living. And the other one went into the Air Force and he was an air traffic controller, had all kinds of job offers after he got out of the military.
Yeah,
And he's got a great job with a railroad. So they both would tell you it was one of the best things that happened to them and to their life, that they
yeah,
really focused and learned some leadership. And I think it would apply to women as well. I
sure.
think that a lot of women have found the military, at least for a portion of their life, to be really helpful.
Yeah,
Some of them have made it to generals and admiral and to the top ranks now
yeah,
of the military, which
yeah,
I think is great.
yeah. And I
Having
mean, you
that
speak to
balance.
the discipline piece of it, and I'm curious though, because it's interesting to me that your books certainly come from a place of, emotional honesty and vulnerability and connection and communication. and your writing is almost, not to be overly dramatic, but a radical act of love, if you will. So do you think that we undervalue those so-called softer tools like empathy and connection and communication in our modern society? And would you suggest that people try and reclaim them or?
Oh, sure. And again, you see it every day. There's so much going on, and we're just bombarded on our phones and on TV.
Yeah,
And, we know what's going on all over the world every day,
yeah,
almost instantly. And it's a lot, again, of negative news, if you
yeah,
really look at
yes.
it.
Oh,
And I still want to stay up to date on everything that's going on. And, whether it's politics or whether it's the military or business, there's always going to be things you don't agree with.
yeah,
But again, we have to live with each other. We're all Americans and we all love this country. And we have a real blessing here in this country to be free
yeah,
like we are. It's so rare.
yeah,
There's really not a country like it in the world. So I keep falling back on that just how blessed we are and appreciate where you are, what your life has given you so far.
yeah.
I don't know
And
if
what's
that
that
answers
freedom
your
worth
question.
if we lose connection, right? Because I love that. It's all about that human connection. So now
Making
intuition
it a
had,
high and making it a high priority, like
yes,
you mentioned earlier.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And our family, my brothers and my sister and our families, extended families, we still make it a point to get together every year in Colorado, have a golf tournament, and enjoy each other's company. And it's so much fun.
That's nice.
But we are a very lucky family in that
Yeah,
because a lot of families tend to lose touch with each other because they're so busy
yeah,
with their lives
yeah,
and their
yeah,
so again, I would say that's important to make
yeah.
it a priority.
Yeah. And lose connection over differences because they don't learn a way to be able to have those difficult discussions in ways that are still respectful, right? Where you can appreciate each
Right.
other. Now, and I wanted to just touch before we have to sign off, because I assume that intuition, played some role for you, certainly in survival and coping, both literally and emotionally. So how do you have any advice for how we can learn to trust that quieter voice in the when we're in the heat of life's battles, like you were literally in one, but even figuratively in life's battles, how can we learn to trust that quieter voice, that intuition?
Wow, that's a great question because again, I think a lot of people have that negative voice going on in their head and finding something wrong with everything.
Yeah,
And I try to I did this in sales too for years because you have very big ups and downs in
yeah,
sales. When you lose a big sale you've been working on for a year
yeah,
and you can't understand why you didn't get the contract, those are tough times to deal with.
yeah,
But again, as long as you kind of can monitor your emotions, not get too high, not get too low, just kind of even keel.
yeah,
I think and having some balance in your
yeah,
life, other things that are interest you besides your
yeah,
work, because you're going to have problems at work.
yeah,
That always
yeah,
happens. But again, it's how you deal with
yeah,
those and
yeah.
don't carry them too long.
Yeah. And I
And
like that highlight about the positive versus negative because I think we are so inundated with negative news today. And I was talking to somebody who recently who said they make it a habit to everybody they encounter to ask them, what's something that's going great for you right now? Because we forget it. We get so focused on what's going wrong. It's such a simple shift, right? Just in every day to be asking yourself when you're feeling like crap, what's something that's going great for me right now? So, well, this is,
that,
sorry.
that's the way to get that voice out of your head because that's a
Yes.
positive voice,
Yes. Yes,
as you said.
absolutely. And so important to retrain our brains because, the Cleveland Clinic says we have like the average person has 60,000 thoughts a day, most of which repeat. And for the vast majority of people, most of those are negative thoughts. So imagine the power of shifting. If you turn most of those negative thoughts to positive ones and you're repeating those thoughts, what a different life you would have, right? What a more positive life. Well,
Yeah,
this has been
no
a
question.
great chat, Don, and I normally like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life? Doesn't have to be about anything we've talked about today, just one of those aha moments where you see things differently or life differently.
Oh, I've had several actually, but I think one was when I was a junior in high school. My uncle, who I adored, he was my dad's youngest brother, lived in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
And he asked me, "Hey, what are you planning to do for college?" And I'm a junior in high school. I
Yeah.
haven't given
Hadn't thought of
it
it.
a thought. And I said, I don't know, I might go to junior college or to Iowa. And he says, how would you like to come out to Columbus and live with us? Go to Ohio State. And that was a light bulb moment for me right there. I
Yeah.
said, wow, I could go to a big university. Now I had to get my grades up
Yeah.
that next year because I was kind of in the middle of the class and I needed to be in the top third.
Yeah.
That was a requirement for out of state. But I got to live with a great family for 4 years in
Yeah.
Columbus and go to a great university that had great football games and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
That light bulb
Nice.
turned on, and all of a sudden, I knew I wanted to go do that more than anything. And I dedicated my whole senior year to bringing my grades up and making sure that I could go.
Yeah.
And also, the draft was hanging over us,
Yeah.
so that was an incentive.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you talk about light bulb moments, I think those do happen to all of us here and there in life.
Yeah.
And again, if you take advantage of the opportunity, a lot of good things can happen.
Yeah.
And that'd be my advice is I've been lucky enough to have a few of those moments in my life.
Beautiful. Yeah. And
And
be open to it when they
yeah,
come, right? I love that. I think that's another hidden message in that as well. Like you could just as easily have let that go in one ear and out the other when your uncle said that, but you were open to the possibility, which is a great lesson. So where can people learn more about you, Don? Where should we send them?
well, I have a website. Some people have said they've had a hard time finding the book on Amazon,
Hmm.
Letters to Mom. So I have a website that's called lifelessonsbooks.net. Lifelessonsbooks.net. And it'll have all my books there. And if you just click on the button, it'll take you right to the page in Amazon. But,
Fantastic.
and I'm just coming out with the audiobook now in the next few weeks. So I'm kind of
Congrats.
excited about that. Yeah.
That's
So
fabulous.
there's always something good to kind of keep working on.
Yeah, well, keep going. Goodness knows we've got lots of life lessons to learn, so you keep at it. And for our listeners, don't panic if you didn't catch that. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes as well. Do check it out. Goodness knows we can all use more life lessons. And as I say, it's a beautiful combination of some of the more serious elements, but mixed with wit and humanity. So thanks so much, Don, for sharing your experience with us here today and through your books. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Cindy.
And for our listeners, I have no doubt you got lots of value from this. There was just such interesting stories and perspective on life. And we all need to open ourselves up to those new perspectives so we can continue to grow. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done that and give the gift of sharing. Share the podcast with other people. And before we sign off, if this episode maybe lit a bit of a fire in you, if you're ready to stop playing small and start negotiating bigger, think about coming to work with me, whether it's one-on-one, in a powerful group, or through my online programs. I've got you covered. So let's tap into that feminine power of yours and start getting more of what you want and deserve and without apology. Are you in? If so, head to artoffemininenegotiation.com to check it out. And make sure to grab a copy of my book of the same name if you haven't done that yet. Art of Feminine Negotiation, How to Get What You Want from the Boardroom to the Bedroom. And that's a wrap for this episode. So now go renegotiate the life that they told you you had to settle for. Remember that every moment is a negotiation. Choose presence, choose power, choose purpose. This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement. You are part of something bigger now. And together, I like to think we're redefining power, one conversation, one negotiation at a time. So join the movement and lead the change. And please do lead with heart, negotiating like the powerful force of nature that you are, because feminine doesn't mean weak, it means unstoppable. So until next time, take care.